controversial, only one way to do it, grounding and bonding. So Tim Duffy, K3LR, is the CEO of DX Engineering, and he's going to discuss the ways that we can keep our station grounded and bonded. All right, Tim, you're up.
Okay, and thanks so much, Ed. Ed, you or somebody else needs to allow screen sharing.
Okay, Brad, can you do that, please? All right, you're all set.
Nope, still locked out of that.
I tried, Brad. I can't get into it. It's got to be you.
Here we go. I got it now. Thanks, guys.
And we'll just chalk it up to packet delay.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me to speak to the club this evening. I'm out here in Western Pennsylvania, so it's raining like cats and dogs out here, but at least it's not snowing yet. But it is so good to talk to a California club, and great to have so many members on this evening via Zoom. We're going to talk about grounding and bonding, and so I'm going to share my screen. We've got to do a little dance here because Zoom has changed things a little bit, and back in here. There we go. And let me know if you see my slides.
Looks perfect.
Okay, thank you, Keith. And so we're going to talk about the difference between grounding and bonding, and there is a difference. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can in our stations for AC safety, for power safety, lightning protection, and we want to take care of our RF and audio. I'm going to show you some techniques. I'm going to show you how the system approach works. And I'm also going to leave you with some resources that you can get more information on this topic. The bulk of this talk was taken from the ARRL handbook, the ARRL antenna book, one of the best books around, Grounding and Bonding for the Radio Amateur. You can also find lots of resources online. The Motorola R56 guidelines are free and online, and K9YC out there in California has done a tremendous amount of research into this topic. And if you want to learn more, go to his website. So there's no such thing as RF ground. You hear that term, but it's not there. We're not going to focus on ground loops, and single point ground is something that we are going to focus on. And remember that the earth is just not some sort of a cesspool that you can throw RF or lightning into and expect it to magically disappear. Bonding is what we're going to focus on, because that is the big part of getting the best performance out of your station. And it's going to, we want to keep all our points in our radio stations at the same voltage. It's not expensive. It's not hard. It does require the right materials. And the great news is it works in your favor for RF management, lightning protection, and AC safety. But for bonding to work, it has to be low impedance, and the lengths of the wires have to be short at the frequencies of interest, heavy enough to carry the expected current. If we're expecting lightning, we got to, that's a large amount of current, and they have to be able to survive outside. Inside the ham station, we want to use a flat weave braid known as tin copper braid. We have that at DX Engineering. I like to use the 1-inch variety, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. I also like to use strap, 2-inch strap, copper strap. You do not ever want to use tin copper braid outside. It will deteriorate very fast, and braid from old coax is no good either, because that's exposed copper, and whether it's inside or outside, that's going to go away fast as well. And we want to make sure that we always have safety first. And when it comes to your power system in your house, you want to make sure that it's done right. And even though I'm an electrical engineer, I always hire a professional electrician to do my AC wiring work. And you say, why would you do that? Because that's what he does every day. He knows the local code, he knows how to do it, and he's going to do it very safely. So it's very, very important. So grounding for AC safety, you hear that as green wire ground, third wire ground, equipment ground, but it has a twofold purpose. It provides a path for AC common point faults. It also stabilizes your AC power voltage during faults and transients such as lightning. And so here's how the wiring works with your utility transformer going into your main breaker panel. You have 3 wires that come in, 2 hots, and the neutral, which is also grounded at the utility transformer through a ground rod. And then there's a neutral bus and a ground bus. And then there's a main bonding jumper that goes between those 2 buses. And that jumper is only in place in the main breaker panel. If you have sub panels, I have 5 sub panels here at K3LR, that main bonding jumper is not there. There's only one place that the ground and neutral are connected together, and that's in the main box. And the ground is also connected to the box itself. And then another ground rod is important from a safety standpoint that connects right to the ground bus and the box. And so here's some examples of clamps that are used for AC safety grounding. I like to do what is in the center photo, which is exothermic weld. That's known as CAD weld. We sell them at DX Engineering as one-shots, basically welds the number 2 wire to the top of the ground rod. And so that connection is very low resistance, low impedance. And so for AC safety grounding, we have to put all our ground rods together so that everything is on a common bond. One of the things with lightning, you have to help it make good decisions, which means keep it out of your station. And so we want to have heavy, low impedance paths to the earth. We want these paths outside of your house. And so don't make it easy for lightning to go through your house. Here's a case where the tower is not grounded and the AC service entry ground electrode is not connected to the shield electrode. That's bad news. What you want to do is this. You want to make sure you have multiple ground rods outside the house and everything is connected together. So here's tower grounding. This is what I do at K3LR. Multiple ground rods, a ground ring, and extended buried radials. And also make sure your shields are all connected to the tower legs. You want to make sure that there's no difference in potential between the shields on your coax and the tower leg. This is a clamp that we make at DX Engineering. And also for towers that are insulated, you want to make sure you have spark gaps or some method of grounding the series fed verticals. Single point ground panel, very important. Also, the RF ground plane. This is a relatively new item that is covered in the grounding and bonding book by N0AX. The radio is connected to the RF ground plane. Then the RF ground plane is connected to the single point ground panel. And I'll show you some real examples of that here in a minute. Also, you can use lightning protection from Polyphaser and others for your AC, for the coax, and your control cables. And so here's some single point ground panel examples. Notice here's the connection to ground to the aluminum plates here. And here's lightning protectors on all of the hardline coming in. And then all of the control wires also have these gas discharge tubes connected to ground. And those limit the amount of voltage that can be on the control wires. Another example of a single point ground panel with all of the components for switching all on an aluminum plate. And so we want to make sure that we have a common bonded ground connection, and we're going to bond the equipment within the station. And so here is an example of an RF bonding bus, 1/2-inch copper pipe, and each piece of equipment is hooked to that, and then it goes to the single point ground panel. Remember that everything in your station is an antenna. Things that you don't even want to be antennas are antennas. And so it's very important that we have the AC safety ground, lightning protection, single point ground panel. Don't worry about RF ground. You concentrate on bonding, because when you bond correctly, it eliminates hot spots. It reduces RFI. It reduces the sensitivity to the way you have your equipment configured, and it minimizes audio buzz and hum. Make sure that you keep cables short, use a bonding bus, minimize the loop area, keep the cables together. Here's an example of an RF ground plane. Here's a radio on top of aluminum plate, and here's the RF bonding bus. And so you want to run the cables along the ground plane, and you bond the station ground system. Remember that all currents flow on all wires. However, a single solid ground system made of a short, heavy, direct connection satisfies all the requirements that you need for AC safety, lightning protection, and RF management. So here's another example. You've got the RF bonding bus, so all of the ham radio equipment is connected to that. That connects to the single point ground panel, and then all of the other items in your house connect there as well. So you see the service entry ground here. You see the grounding system beneath the tower, ground rods around the house, making sure that everything is connected to the bonding bus, then connected to the ground electrode and the single point ground panel. So there are lots of resources online. There are good books as well, but the Polyphaser and others have great documents. The FAA has some good documents. And again, you can go back and take a look at this. The ARRL has a lot of information on electrical safety, grounding, lightning protection. WHAI has a really good website on and talking about ground systems as well. Remember this photo here, the RF ground plane. And so here at K3LR, this is W3YQ installing the RF ground planes here at K3LR, which are copper sheets. These are available at DX Engineering, and they go underneath the radio. I use the 2-inch strap to connect down to my ground rods. And so that's what you see here. Brass hardware, which has the least resistance. It's very good for grounding and bonding. The 2-inch strap connecting on to the number 2 copper tin that connects to the ground rods. And so here is my single point ground panel, the 2-inch strap down to the ground rods, the 1-inch tin copper braid, one for the radio, one for the amplifier, and then a connection for the antenna switch. And here's the RF ground plane connection. So this is the going to the single point ground panel here, and then this will go onto the radio, onto the ground lug on the ICOM radio. We want to keep our cable short, use shielded cable, short straps or wires. Another shot of the RF ground plane, and then the ICOM radio on the RF ground plane. And I also put these underneath the amplifiers as well. It's amazing how this has helped stabilize all the voltages here at K3LR, RF ground planes underneath each radio. Another shot of the single point ground panel. These bars are available at DX Engineering as well. And then the connection on the back of the ICOM radio here with the 1-inch wide tin copper braid. And from the amplifier stud onto the RF ground plane, and then the RF ground plane to the single point ground panel. Now more amplifier connections, another amplifier connection here, 1 inch wide, 10 copper braid. And that is my presentation on grounding and bonding, and I'm available for any questions.
All right, very good. Thank you, Tim. You know, I have, a few months ago, I picked up the grounding and bonding book. Wow, you can't even see that. I guess my thing, but I picked up the grounding and bonding book from Ward Silver, and I did pick up some of your strap, cabling strap as well. So I'm about to go down that rabbit hole of grounding and bonding everything.
Yeah, Ed, just in time for you bought the first edition. Now the second edition is out.
Well, I guess we'll have to get that. Yeah.
Sorry about that, but yeah, this is the second edition of grounding and bonding.
Oh, very good. Okay, so let's go to questions. We have any questions for Tim?
Ed, I have a question if I can ask.
Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, Tim, you didn't mention this, but one of the concerns that I've always had about my grounding rod is how good the connection would be as the wire makes it and bolts onto the top of that rod. So what's your opinion about using conductive grease to keep that connection good?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gary. And I like using Jet Lube SS30.
Mm-hmm.
We sell that at DX Engineering, and that is an antioxidant. And that is a good way to keep that connection good.
Okay. I have one more question if I can ask.
Sure.
It's not practical for me to use braid to ground my rig. And I have about a 70-foot run before I reach the grounding rod. Right now, I have about a 10-gauge wire that I had to use just by necessity. Is that such a bad ground that you wouldn't recommend it?
No, that's a good ground.
Okay.
Strap would be better, Gary, but that number 10 is going to be just fine.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, very good. Yeah, I have kind of the same problem. My shack is on the opposite end of the house from my electrical panel. And I believe the house has what they call an oofer ground because I cannot find a ground rod to save my life anywhere. So when it gets time to start pounding grounding rods into the into the ground and then bonding them together, I got to figure out where I'm going to terminate them. All right, any more questions?
I got a question.
Zach, go ahead.
What about grounding in an apartment house?
So that is a challenge, Zach. No question about it. If you can get an outside ground rod for your station, that's great. If not, you're just going to have to, having those RF ground planes is a real help. But do the best you can and bond all your equipment together.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
All right,
I
any
have
more?
I have a question.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Thanks, Tim. Great presentation, by the way. Just wanted to say awesome. So I have a similar setup, I guess, to Ed's, where my shack is located on one opposite end of my house compared to like my house mains. I do have a grounding rod kind of right outside the shack, but in terms of bonding the shack ground rod to the mains ground rod, for a situation like that, how do you kind of recommend doing that? I've heard that, or at least read online a little bit, that some people kind of go through their house grounds mains to kind of bond those two. Is that what you would suggest, or would you advise against that? How would we kind of go about that? Because I would assume that it's kind of a common thing for us to have our shacks away from our mains panel. So we're just wanted your best input.
Yeah, you're right, Mike. You want to make sure that your shack ground gets connected to your main breaker box ground so that there's no difference in potential. That's what we want to make sure, that everything is at the same voltage potential. And Mike, what I tell everybody is to consult your local electrician who knows the code in your area and make sure it's done right.
Okay, so it's not as simple as like sticking a wire into the grounds port of a house
No,
mains and then
No,
calling it a day. Okay.
no. We want to make sure that we do this very safely.
Sure, sure. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. Appreciate the presentation.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Any more questions?
Norm has one.
Norm, go ahead.
Hi, Tim. Thank you. My radios sit on a metal shelf, not the tin or the copper like yours. Can I bond those together and use that as my bond or ground or
Yeah,
whatever you want to call
that
it?
can be your RF ground plane, Norm. That's a great idea.
Okay. How about also now my power supply, 12-volt power supply is separate from the radio. Should I run a line over to that also?
No, it really affects the radio equipment. So it's really radios, amplifiers, and tuners.
Coax switch, you had that too?
Should be bonded. Yes,
Okay.
bond that in.
Thank you.
Now, I got two questions based on that. Do you ground each shelf or just the rack in general?
You ground each shelf.
You would ground each shelf.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question is, I have an Astron linear power supply, and I've noticed that the negative terminal is directly connected to the ground on my on the 3-prong plug. Does that create a ground loop?
Well, it can. But if you're not getting any hum or buzz, Ed, I'd leave it alone.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so far I'm not,
Good.
other than when I wire something up wrong. All right, any more questions? Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. A couple of, well, more comments than questions. Some of us here in Canal Valley have had our houses built on platforms where the platforms had rebar through the 2x4s on the framing that go to the concrete. And at one time I had experimented by measuring the resistance or the grounding, if you will, from one bolt that was on one side of a part of the 2x4 to the other side. And it was surprisingly that it was pretty much of a good ground. So in my garage, that's where I had put my ground bus situation initially. When I had my 100-watt panel AC changed to a 200 watt or 200 amp, I'm sorry, not watt, 200 amp, RE, WA6RIE, he put a ground rod right down where the incoming box is. And then since my shack is, on the other side of the house where the service panel is, he put a ground rod just outside the window where I bring my stuff in. And just recently I went through and did a full inspection and shining things up and get rid of corrosion. Every 5 years it's a good idea here with the salt air to go around and check all your connections. So I did all that for all the outside things and got them all cleaned up and then gooped up. So they'll hopefully be another 5 years. But when I got everything all together and turned everything on, that was surprisingly, good performance, good continuity now. So if all of a sudden your shack is showing some strange situations, like on mine, where the curio cabinet my wife has apparently tap-on lights on 40 meters, I guess they're sensitive in terms of the wiring or grounding of the frequency, and so I'm sending CW, and the lights are going on and off, in a Morse code fashion. So you never know. You just have to get your meter and go around and check the various voltage differences to see whether you got anything that's floating between your white wire and your green wire. But as Tim says, having a licensed electrician to go through and nail things down, so that way you got good solid wire going back to the panel, and your shack having at least a minimum ground wire, a ground rod, I mean. I just want to make those comments.
Oh, very good. Yeah, speaking of lights going on and off, whenever I'm on 40 meters, all the motion detector lights, floodlights outside go on. So that's always a lot of fun. The neighbors like that, especially at 2 o'clock in the morning. Warren, I think you had a question.
Yes, I did.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Tim. Since you're in Pennsylvania, you get a lot more rain than we do. We have, 300 days that we may not have any rain. So ground rods, can they still be effective when your soil is dry? And we have a lot of rocky soil and stuff. So is it still rather effective, or is it more important just to have all the radio equipment interconnected?
Well, it's both, Warren. Having all the radio equipment bonded together is really important, and you can control that. You know, getting a ground rod in some of the places in California, I used to work in California, and so I know how challenging that can be, but you do your best. Ed talked about a UFER ground. If you look that up online, that can be a solution for you as well. That's UFER ground. But you want to make sure that everything is bonded together, and then do the best you can with the ground rod. You know, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be moist soil, but and again, this is where that licensed electrician comes in, because they know how to deal with that. And the whole ground rod thing is all about AC safety and lightning. That's what that's about. Your station performance is on bonding. So, you know, you have the two things there, Warren.
All right, very good. Bill.
Yeah, Tim, do you have any recommendations for field day where you have lots and lots of stations that are widely separated?
Yeah. You know, on field day, number one, if you have generators or solar panels, you want to make sure you have a ground rod. You know, from a safety standpoint, that's the thing. You want to have a ground rod for all of your power to work against. And then when it comes to the stations themselves on field day, you want to make sure that the stuff is bonded together. So each station should have a single point ground panel that everything is bonded to.
Okay.
But nothing between the stations then.
No, I wouldn't worry about between the stations. Each station, I mean, I've got 11 stations here in my shack, and each one of the 11 has its own single point ground panel.
Wow. All right.
That's another slideshow for you, Ed.
I can imagine. Bill, any more questions, or is that it? Okay. Any more questions for Tim?
Yeah, Ed, I have one more question, by the way.
Sure, Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, you know what, Tim, what's to prevent me, if I have copper or steel pipes, water pipes in my walls, what's to prevent me from burrowing through the wall and putting a ground strap there and connecting to my water pipes?
Well, I mean, that was a practice that was generally accepted back in the 60s and 70s.
Mhm.
But Gary, every once in a while, you can either have plastic in there,
Yeah,
and you can also have things on your hot water tank or on a pump system that, you know, when it comes to voltage variance, you don't want to have that being a part of your ground. So be careful.
okay. Well, for my main panel, the grounding strap comes out and attaches to a copper water pipe.
Okay.
So I know that at least a portion, if not all of the copper, which is all connected because it's water, is at earth ground.
Okay.
So, I mean, I actually debated with this, but I didn't do that. But, you know, just burrow through the wall, find a water pipe if you can, and attach to it. So,
Yeah, as long as there's no plastic involved.
yeah. Oh, it's copper.
Good.
It's copper.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I
But-
can interject quickly,
Sure.
the problem with copper is that very frequently your water supply may still be iron pipe, meaning there's going to be a dielectric fitting in there at some point,
Mhm.
isolating your copper from the larger system.
Yeah. Well, the copper, Keith, that I know of goes to at least into the slab. And I know that it's connected with somehow, you know, through what all the soldered connections and whatnot to the same pipe that is grounded through my panel. So that is sitting at earth ground as well. I mean, I agree. I don't think it's a good idea, but sometimes it's the only thing you have available.
You do the
And
best
how
you
is
can.
that affected by a lot of our houses, mine included? I mean, it's all copper pipe, but a lot of my pipe runs in the ceiling. So it's up there and it's probably in the good neighborhood of being, being a 70 meter antenna, or 75
Right.
meter antenna. Uh, So, yeah, I would think you'd not want to have that running through your roof.
I don't know. I mean, it's whatever's available, but
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I have copper pipe coming in from the street. I know that, and
Yeah.
all the piping in the house is copper.
Yeah.
But I know when DirecTV installed an antenna, a dish out here years ago, they ran a little green ground wire right over to my water spigot.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ed, I have the same situation where I don't have the antenna now, I have fiber optic, but they ran a ground from the antenna, from the dish itself, literally it was dish, to the panel outside, and that was just a green 10 gauge wire.
Right. That's
That's
what
the
they
thing.
did to me, but they put it on a water spigot that was out near there.
Yeah, but I suspect that that's enough.
Well,
You know
yeah, but
that-
the only problem is if that's for lightning, I mean, that runs through the house,
Yeah, well,
Right.
right?
it's what they had available. You know what, before I go away, let me add one
Gotcha,
thing
Bill.
about the grounding rod in California, is that I put my grounding rod where the sprinklers will hit it. Ended problem.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah, if
Or
I,
at least for the first couple of feet.
Yeah.
Bill,
Yeah.
go ahead.
if I may
Um,
something,
Just a point of information, we have in our equipment box for field day, a large number of copper pipe. It's about 1/2 inch copper pipe. It's already pre-drilled. It's already got screws on it. So if anybody in their station is not properly bonded, if they'll see me during field day, we'll happy to loan you one, and you can bond all of your equipment together at least. And even if you don't have a single point RF ground, that's got to be better than nothing.
We think so. Ari, you had a question?
yeah, no, I wanna respond to Gary. Basically, all the homes here in California, most of the water company, they changing the copper from the house to the street with plastic. Okay, so for example, my house here, I have everything's copper throughout the house, but from the regulator from outside to the street, it's all plastic. So look out for that. Okay, the electrical code require here in California minimum two ground rod 6 feet apart from each other, minimum 6 feet, and bond them together, of course, all the way to the electrical panel. So that's for that.
You know what, Ari, I would ask though, is that does your copper water pipe touch earth ground somewhere?
Probably yes, but who cares? I don't care.
Okay,
It's not probably not good ground.
Yeah,
And I have 2 ground rods for the main
Mhm.
house.
yeah. No, I
And
agree that,
one-
yeah,
And 1 ground rod going to the shack.
right. I agree that a copper water pipe is not desirable, but sometimes that's all you have. So,
And again, I can't emphasize enough, and Ari, thank you so much for your comments, that you need to have a local licensed electrician that knows the code for your area to make sure it's done right. Because if something bad happens, the first thing the insurance company does is goes back to the inspection sticker and all that, so you don't want to mess around.
Tim, I'm here in California and I'm licensed electrician, so that's why I came in and say what I had to say.
Thank you, Ari.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you very much. All right, any more questions for Tim? David? You're muted there, David.
Okay, I have a question about the bonding of, I've got number 10 wire, and right now it's just clamped on top of a stainless steel tubing that goes down like 10 feet. So will that exothermic bonding, CAD weld, whatever you call it, does that go with stainless?
No. It just works with copper.
Okay, I didn't know if it get hot enough.
Yep. I don't think so, David.
Okay.
All right, very good. Thank you, David. Any more questions for Tim? I'm not seeing any. All right, very good. Well, let's all give Tim a big round of applause. Thank you, Tim, for coming. Appreciate it. Great talk.
Well, thank you so much, Ed, for inviting me to speak to your club. And it's been great. And to those of you who are DX engineering customers, thank you so much for your business and your trust. To those of you who are not, give us a shot, give us a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised how well it goes. We do have a big inventory position in our warehouse in Sparks, Nevada. And so lots of California is 1 day ground from Sparks. And we are owned by Summit Racing Equipment, which some of you may be also in the car hobby and know Summit Racing. And so Summit Racing and DX are together. We are great partners. And again, give us a shot. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised how well it goes. We've got a tremendous sales team that has over 500 years of combined experience. And these guys are on the air. They're emergency coordinators, they're VEs. We're doing it all. So Ed, thanks again.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll just say that anytime I've ever ordered from DX Engineering, I was impressed with how fast the shipping was. It was amazing. It was like no sooner hitting the enter key that it's rolling down the driveway. It's very quick. All right. Well,
Great,
thank
Ed.
you. Thank you very much, Tim. Appreciate
All right. Thanks very much. I'm going to go off to my net.
it.
73.
7-3.